Hello.
Hello.
Hey, here we
Hey,
are.
here we are. Mike, welcome to the Between the Ears podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on here. It's
Yeah.
honor. Awesome.
Would you mind answering this question?
Sure.
It's the most awkward way to ask a pre-question question.
And you wonder why people are afraid of you, or you don't
No
have.
one's afraid of me. The people who are afraid of me are no longer here. Mike, who are you? Who is Mike G?
Oof. Uh, who am I? Well, we'll start with what I do. How about that? All right. So
Sure.
yeah, I work for CrossFit, and that's how we know each other. Worked there since, geez, 2007 ish. It's kind of the entry point into employment with
Oh,
CrossFit.
Wow.
Yeah.
was that as a level 1 person, or
That
was that
was
as a?
like interning, like the old school interning. So done with my own level one training at CrossFit
Mhm.
Atlanta. Um, the experience at the level one was like, oh, you got to think like 2006, right? When I went through,
Right.
just fitness was way different. I mean,
Yeah.
way different than it is now. I mean, a lot of changes have taken place, and CrossFit and functional fitness, whatever you want to call it, is extremely mainstream, and you see it everywhere. But back then, you just didn't, right?
Right. Right.
And so Greg was instructing and lecturing at that seminar, and I remember leaving and just being like, my mind is blown, you know. And I was
Right.
in
Right.
school at that time. I was in school for my bachelor's in exercise science, and kind of went against everything that I was being taught at the time. But
Right.
it
Right.
made sense, as
Mm-hmm.
much as it could. Don't get me wrong. Greg talked way over my head a few times, but even that was pretty awesome. So, anyways, the experience was amazing, and I went back. I started training at CrossFit Atlanta and coaching there and everything. And I was like, man, I want to be a part of that experience. So Dan, the owner of CrossFit Atlanta, had a good relationship with Greg, and he would, because back then affiliates were small and they weren't
Right.
everywhere. So Dan would help out in the Southeast seminars, which would happen like once a month. You'd have like one seminar back then that made it to the East Coast or Southeast. And he'd help out. He'd bring medicine balls and barbells and like whatever he could bring. And so I started going with him to help. And I honestly didn't realize I entered an internship process.
Yeah.
I
Oh.
just like was involved and I really enjoyed it. And like I started getting like smaller tasks, like, hey, do you want to run the
Mhm.
pull-up station? And that kind of stuff. And
Right.
and then all of a sudden they were like, hey, we want to build an East Coast team. Like, you want to do this and get paid for it? And I was like, well, that sounds amazing. And
Yeah.
in
Wow.
Yeah.
2008, I was employed and, traveling around the world, teaching seminars. And I
Cool.
mean, I think I did over 400.
Oh my God.
I know,
Wow.
right? And then, which was an experience that I wouldn't trade for anything. I mean, it did get to the point with travel and hotels and airlines and all that kind of stuff where I was like, man, I just can't do this anymore. I couldn't be away from the kids
Yeah.
anymore. But
Mm.
there were some years where, like, in places I got to visit and people I got to meet and cultures I got to experience that you just, you know, and
Yeah.
all while talking
Well, it's
about something I'm super passionate about, and that could potentially, have this trickle down effect to really change a lot of
right.
lives. So it all just like was amazing, actually. Yeah, it was cool.
It's cool. Like a lot of people travel for work, but I think what's unique about traveling for CrossFit and the seminars is you're like immediately immersed and welcomed into like the locals and like the culture. Whereas like if you're traveling for work and you're like bumbling around like, oh, I wonder where we should go to eat. CrossFit, you're already like you're experiencing everything in like a very hometown kind of way. And
Totally.
that's probably like pretty unique.
Mm.
I mean, some of my best memories of like dinners were like going to um uh going to Argentina and then just eating like a whole bunch of like steak and meat and drinking wine at
Yeah.
Pablo's house, and he had
Right.
this massive like brick grill in his backyard, huge, and just like threw a bunch of meat on there and had some like good Argentinian wine and just sat there and just talked to
Yeah.
like all his people and the people from the gym and it was amazing. It was such an awesome experience. So yeah, that was great. And then once that, I don't want to say ran its course, right? But things run their course. So you just get to the point where you're like, it was great. I just can't do it. I just can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
I always said if at that point, if seminars were, if I could do local seminars on Tuesdays and Wednesdays, I could potentially do that for the rest of my life.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But the kids are playing sports and you start losing weekends and then you get delayed and cancellations and all those different things, like they add up and it was time.
Yeah.
So that's how I got into more of like the content and education side of CrossFit, which eventually kind of morphed itself into what it is now, where I entered into CrossFit Health because CrossFit Health had changed directions from its inception, which was really dealing with the mess behind, research, pharmaceutical industry, big soda, all those other big corporations that kind of were infiltrating research into something that now is what we consider bridging the gap between healthcare and fitness, which is essentially, educating healthcare professionals, not just MDs, really any healthcare professional, about the efficacy of lifestyle changes like CrossFit and nutrition, sleep, stress management, all those different things, and how that is true healthcare and improving health
Right.
versus like treating sickness. But with that education and exposure to CrossFit and community and those types of things, and healthcare professionals and MDs, they can use that and actually educate and create action with their own patients, what has this like cyclical effect into patients experiencing CrossFit in one way or another, and then hopefully making their way into the affiliate and then having the life-changing experience that we've seen a lot of people have. But then also taking a lot of what we're learning from these healthcare professionals and MDs, and then, finding the right mode of communication and language to provide that to coaches and affiliates so that they can use that with their athletes, right, and the people that walk in their gym. So it's a cool reciprocal relationship that we're creating here. We kind of see ourselves as the middleman, and that's the idea behind CrossFit Health and like kind of where we're going now with it. Yeah.
It is also like a cool resource just from a end user, like random person, right? Like to tackle that you guys, CrossFit big CrossFit, I feel like tries to provide resources for affiliates in this bigger way. And it's definitely addressing all the things that are becoming more mainstream, like the Huberman, the Chris Palmer, like all these things that maybe all affiliates aren't sitting around listening to Huberman or Peter Attia, but from a CrossFit source, someone they trust, like there's some education around, like,
Sure.
Yeah, to your point, sleep, stress, health, nutrition, not just so it's non-dogmatic in many ways. And I've appreciated seeing like the breadth of what you guys put out.
Oh, cool.
It's
Thanks.
not, it's not so singular. And I think that's very healthy for the CrossFit community to see.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. I
Mike,
think.
Yeah. Sorry. I
No.
didn't cut you off.
No, I was just going to say, like, that's honestly, I started helping with content and health about a year ago, and that was really our goal, is to, all right, how can we make a lot of this information more accessible to the community. So yeah, it's cool. It's cool to like hear that was the well, we hit that result. So that's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
What have you learned from the healthcare professionals, from the MDs, from the NPs, whomever are kind of you talk about this reciprocal relationship, which I think is like a really awesome way of describing it. And I'm curious, like, what have they taught you? What have they taught CrossFit, so that you can continue to do the mission of CrossFit and CrossFit Health?
Well, I mean, there's a lot, right? And it can get very specific. I think of things like, we talked about Chris Palmer just now. I mean, you think about, I mean, there's a ton to learn in something like mental health, in how maybe the way that we've thought about it for so many years provides some explanation, but not all of it. And that there might be something that links all these explanations together, like, metabolic health and mitochondria, which when you take something like metabolic health and mitochondria, you can make that accessible and understandable to, not to say, and I don't want to talk down. I'm not saying this in a way like talking down to affiliates or coaches.
Yeah.
I don't mean accessible and understandable because they don't understand mitochondria and metabolic health. I mean, speaking their language in terms of what they can do to affect these areas as trainers or affiliate owners. You know what I mean? So,
Mhm.
and then how what does that affect? What does that affect on not only physical health but mental health? So, there's really cool things like that. I think when a lot of the nutrition stuff comes to mind when I think about what you can learn from healthcare professionals. Like Dr. Robert Sivas has some really amazing things on, carb addiction and some of the mindset behind making, with his practice, it's nutritional changes. But when you talk to him, you can very easily see how this applies to any type of behavior change that
Right.
you're
Right.
going after here, right? So, those are two that come to mind very quickly. And I could probably tap into, I mean, geez, I just talked to um, Lane Norton and Alan Aragon, who, they have similar beliefs in nutrition than as CrossFit, but not completely. So, I mean, there's a lot to
Yeah.
learn there too. Like, hey, um, what is really the most important part of nutrition? Like, does everybody fit into one bucket? Is it, hey, at the very least, you need to make sure that you're getting the right amount of proteins. And then, as long as the carb and fat sources are from good sources, then they kind of wash themselves out. And you can play with those really based off of your own goals, right? If it's like maintenance goals, weight loss goals, maybe the carbs go down
Mhm.
and fat's up as long as your protein hits the right amount. Or if it's performance goals, okay, well, maybe fat goes down a little bit and carbs go up because you have to support performance. But, there's a protein intake that everybody should be having, or a range that everybody should be having. So there are things like that where, you learn from it. It makes you think a little bit more, makes you think outside of the box, it makes you explore different things. I'm not going to say it necessarily makes you change your message right away, but it
Mm-hmm.
forces you to take the time and open your mind to changes, right? Like, hey, maybe we can change something. And one of the things that, and I know I'm kind of rambling here, but one of the cool things about nutrition, after talking to so many people, whether it's like, someone who's carnivore, ketogenic diet, a little bit higher
Right.
carb, like a Lane Norton or Alan Aragon, or, you look at the CrossFit nutrition recommendation, you're like, wow, it's pretty solid. Like, it hits everything.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, hey,
Yeah.
eat good food and then find out the right amount and ratios that work best for you. Like,
Yeah.
how do you change that? You know what I mean? Like it's like the
Yeah,
thing,
pretty good.
you talk to anybody and there's even the people who have there's no bad food belief will still say things like you need to watch processed foods because of maybe it's not for the same reasons. Maybe they don't think it has anything to do with insulin or those types of things, but you definitely have a higher chance of overeating. And if you overeat and then you have too many calories, and that can go
Right.
into
It
the
comes
energy
back
balance.
to the same
But
problem. Yeah.
still the same thing. It's like the bulk of your food should be whole foods,
Yeah.
natural foods. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's
Yeah.
cool. It's cool. Like when I think about everything I've learned in nutrition through talking to all these people, I wouldn't change anything that CrossFit recommends, but you just learn that, hey, everybody has different needs within this umbrella of this recommendation, right?
Mhm.
So,
Yeah. Yeah. And it is cool that the understanding is you do need to experiment, and it's not,
totally.
yeah, and like here's the constraints, the sort of guidelines, and and I think that is something that generally does happen with, the CrossFit community is looking to um yeah, optimize more than maybe other, like as a whole. They want to do that work and tweak things and try things, and that's really cool to see. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
experimentation. I mean, there's so much to be gained from that, right? I mean, I tend to go back to a standard way of eating that works really well for me, but I will experiment with things just to see, right? Like I did 3 months of carnivore, which was
Right.
cool,
Oh yeah,
but it just
yeah,
wasn't my thing. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
there's
right,
nothing
right.
wrong with it. And I've seen it work really well for people, but for me, it just was not great.
Yeah.
Um,
But doing that experiment, I was talking to a member of ours today, and you know, Peter Attia has a new book out, and he was saying that he wanted to do the nutrition chapter to just be like a page, and it just was like these are the only things we actually really know about nutrition, and so it's kind of interesting. Like there are a handful of things, but the rest is sort of individual or experimentational, or what you're dealing with. But what is interesting, I mean, I've been a vegan. Of course, I've gotten some.
Recently too, which
Yeah, it
was
wasn't that long ago. I've gotten, as
if
you
you
can
did it when you were younger, at least you'd be like, oh well, you were young and
right. No, this was, yeah. And you can imagine some of the people that might come to mind in our, shared circles that maybe gave
sure.
me some flack for that. But
Yes.
I tried it for like a year. It
Wow.
was during my Ironman training, so I kind of was just like all the way on that side.
Yeah.
Um, and like I don't regret it. Like it was an interesting experiment, and I can now speak to like I've tried that. I've done
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Similarly, like we've been doing the ancestral thing, like a little more meat, fruit. Like it's just cool to try that, and yeah, say like this was something that I gleaned from it, and I'm going to take on and put forward in like how I eat. And this is something like, yeah, I don't didn't work for me, and leave that behind. So yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I'd laugh, but I've definitely toyed around with the idea of going vegan for the experience, right? Because it's one thing to
Hmm.
talk about it, but it's another thing to experience it and then have those
Yeah.
talking points to kind of back it up. And like you said, you might learn something from it. I even with the carnivore thing, it's not for me, but I did realize like, hey, eating more meat, having a higher level of protein. I didn't need as many carbs to
Right.
support what I was doing. I actually do pretty well on a low to moderate carb, even with volume
Hmm.
of training. Like it doesn't affect me that much. So there are things
Yeah.
that you still walk away from, even if the experiment itself, or you don't, continue on with that experiment. There is still success in learning from it, and either learn from it and say none of this worked for me, or learning from it and say, hey,
Right.
there are a couple of things that I can move forward with. So
Yeah.
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 it's cool.
Yeah, that notion of learning, like what's awesome too is that's you were you in your undergrad or graduate for your exercise science in
I did
07,
both
06?
while working for CrossFit. So I finished up my undergrad and then got my master's while traveling around. And I mean, it was like the perfect opportunity, right? Like you just work
Yeah.
on weekends, and then I can go to school all week, and
Right.
and um, and then so yeah, I got a master's in exercise science, and then years later, once I came out to California, I ended up getting a master's in public health.
Oh, wow. Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's really neat about your journey, hearing it, that you were getting your undergrad in exercise science,
Mm-hmm.
which, like, no shortage of doctors and letters and names and labs and all of
Sure.
that, textbooks and big words. And then your mind was opened by the level one and this thing, which is not long words and craziness, but an elegance and a attractiveness to, oh, we can actually do something with this.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I remember teaching a level one, I don't know where it was, Virginia Beach maybe, and the dude was a master's of exercise science, and he's like, we have still yet to learn how to squat, and he was in like my squats group or whatever, and I was like, yeah, I know, like, look, I didn't get my master's in exercise science. That's not my background. So, like, I don't feel like I can't really have an opinion here, but, like, as someone who's,
He meant in his education at that point, he had
yeah,
not yet learned
yeah,
how
yeah,
to
yeah,
squat. Okay.
yes,
Yeah, I was
yes,
just
yeah,
clarifying because it
sorry.
sounded like, yeah.
So yeah, here he is getting his, like, final semester of master's degree. And he's like, we still haven't actually, like, taught anybody how to do anything. It's been limited to labs and words and pages. And I was like, yeah, there's a lot of value there, but, like, whereas you might have read 1,000 pages, we've sort of taught 1,000 people. And so, bringing them together, um, and hearing your, passion for learning and your mind opening, I could imagine where perhaps many of your classmates at both the undergraduate and the graduate level, if you didn't defend the crown, it's like, no, you got to defend the crown and not have anything that flies in the face of it. But the thing that flies in the face of it is the little wedge of, well, let's see what else there is. And
Yeah.
that notion of curiosity leading to learning and continuing that as really, like, part of the just ethos of living in life is really cool. And now to see you, what, however many years, 15 years later, in a position of, like, influencing that for others so that they can continue to learn, both on the medical side to the affiliate side to anybody who, basically can improve through movement, is really, that's really cool to kind of, in my mind, I'm seeing, like, this trajectory, this arc of your journey. That's sweet.
No, I appreciate that. It is interesting because I started my bachelor's because I wanted to teach, and I wanted to teach in academia, and I wanted to do research, right? So, um, but yeah, so going to level one, it just kind of it opened everything up, and didn't really change necessarily what I wanted to do yet. It was actually during my master's program. I will say I would totally agree with the participant you had talked to, because really, I mean, I did take like a weightlifting kind of course, but we weren't really taught
Hmm.
how to even move much, but definitely not how to teach people, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
And the master's degree was highly research based, a
Mhm.
lot to do with the different machines, devices, and things that we used, as well as like manuscript script writing. Which I will say, like there was a lot to be learned with improving writing skills and those types of things.
Mhm.
But the other part of that is, out of the entire master's class that I went, those two years with, you know, I don't, I can't pinpoint one of them that went on to get their PhD and actually teach and continue research. So what does that
Hmm.
mean? It means that the rest of them somehow went into industry and
Right.
likely fitness without the
Hmm.
ability to really teach,
Work with people.
coach,
Yeah.
fitness, right?
Right.
So it's a very super interesting that a lot of these master's programs are um, directed towards this tiny percent of students that actually move on and do research. You know,
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
the other part of that though is like I felt pretty lucky to be involved in CrossFit at the time because there was a lot that I learned, you know, by either doing research or studying it, whatever it is, that I could apply and see like, wow, this is potentially like how and why CrossFit works so well, you know,
Right.
like they're, you know,
Mm-hmm.
so that was pretty cool. And it definitely helped with the learning of the material. The other thing that was really cool is my professors were very open-minded, you know, like some of them were, you know, thought I was crazy for doing it. But if I wanted to do research on it, they're like, yeah, you should. And in fact, one of them, Dr. Yuri Fato, helped, you know, he came in after I was already started my master's degree, and he had started doing CrossFit and also, you know, got the bug, right? So we took the biomechanics lab and turned it into what looked like a mock affiliate. And
Mm.
a lot of the research that came out of Kennesaw State until he left was CrossFit based,
Wow.
um, which
That's
was
cool.
really cool. So even though there was some dogma, there always is in
Yeah.
Yeah.
academia,
Yeah.
there
Yeah. Of
was
course.
an open mindedness that I appreciated um, at that university. So
Yeah.
and throughout that department, so that was cool. But I will say
Yeah.
also, like with my goal to teach and educate, man, like once you kind of go through teaching at level ones and level twos, you have a chance to teach at academia, and you go in front of 50 people that are 100% focused on what you say, and they're in it
Right.
and they have great questions. And then you're in the lab class and you're teaching 30 people, and two of them are looking at you and 28 are on their phone. You're like,
Yeah.
no, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
going to go this
Right.
route.
Yeah. The
Like, I want
buy-in
to
is not
educate.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can fulfill my goals to educate on this stuff better
Elsewhere. Yeah.
elsewhere.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's how, you know, and it's kind of morphed into this thing. And yeah, it's cool. I mean, the ability to work and feel like I'm educating or helping create education for um, healthcare professionals and doctors is like, I mean, geez, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's cool. It's
Yeah.
amazing.
So you guys recently did a little interview with, Bill for CrossFit Health, but it's kind of and that was like mental health focused. But you have done one of our sort of mindset workouts,
Or mind opening workouts.
mind opening workout. Um which is it's kind of cool to have you go through that since you guys talked about things and kind of to our point of like studying the pages and talking about the theory and then maybe experiencing something. And I think that's what's the most challenging in the space of what we do with these sort of bringing fitness and mindset together is, the quote, I think it was something that we said pretty regularly at CrossFit seminars. When people would ask, like, well, tell me what CrossFit is, tell me what it is, like, just describe it to me. And like, I want to know. And the answer was like, just show up at like, 10 o'clock, and you can only describe and articulate something to a certain degree, and then the rest is experiential. So you were dosed, as we like to say, with one of Bill's workouts.
Our workout.
Our workouts.
Yeah.
It's our workouts. That's right.
Yeah.
Most of the time, I'm part of the experimentation process where I'm like voluntold to participate and see how things go.
I like that.
um,
It's funny.
yeah. Um, but yeah, so tell us, you did, I think last week's, which was the mindset was stick with it. No, see it through.
See it
That's the one
through.
See
you
it
did,
through.
right? With the
Yeah.
sled.
Yeah.
So tell us kind of just whatever you feel like sharing, like how was that? How did it go? What was that experience like for you? And And do you do workouts like this? Have you done something like that before, or?
Okay, yeah, let's start with that. So one of the things that I realized is that this level of thought, because you know, because I was going through this, like I really tried to pay very close attention to the thought process that went on throughout the workout, right? So from the start, minute to minute, well, let's say round around, minute to minute, round around, but then, 15 minutes in, different checkpoints. And I do think the 1 minute break really gave me a chance to, settle down a little bit and take some time to think about it, which was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the things I noticed is that this level of thought tends to happen in almost every workout that I do, right? I'm just not, I'm just usually not as aware of it. One of the things I used to
Right.
always tell people when I was working out is like, I didn't like loud music. I don't like fast music. I didn't like these things that distracted me from what was going on and what I had to do to finish the workout the way I wanted to finish it. And I felt like, loud noises, somebody in my ear counting down 10-1 or 3-1 and telling me to go, like, was very appreciated,
Yeah.
but it was very distracting. Like anyway, so my point was like, so I think this stuff happens pretty naturally for me and probably a lot of other people out there. But what this workout did is, okay, now let's be really aware of it. And that's what I got out of this. And, it's interesting, like, because the parallels of the thought process and the actions in a workout like this to instances in life where, like, it's very interesting. It's super interesting. And you can tend to see this. I mean, and this is my experience, but you can tend to see this quite often in a lot of different endeavors that you go off after in life, where it's like you're excited, you're all in the beginning. Like, let's throw 100% of everything I have into this. Like, I'm gonna sell out and get this thing done. And then, in this particular workout, I'm a quarter of the way in, and it's not super difficult yet, but you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, let's pump the brakes a little bit because there's a lot left here, right? And now I can start to see, okay, what's happening. I'm getting a little bit of like a stimulus behind what's going on here, and I'm starting to realize I need to make an adjustment. Right, the course I'm currently on, like, I'm giving too much of myself right now. And if I continue to do this, I will completely break down and never see it through. Right. Like, I need to pull back a little bit, take this assessment, see where I am, and then potentially adjust the course. And that's what I had to do. And, like, about a quarter of the way into this thing is, okay, how do I conserve energy? And it ended up getting to this point where every minute off, I would assess, like, okay, what was that feeling for that round? How can I give just enough to complete the next round? Right. And,
Right.
in the beginning, it was like, hey, do burpees as fast as you can. And then it was like, whoa, 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 whoa. Like, this is a long road here. And if you give everything you have too early, like, you're not going to make it. Especially with the goal. Like, my goal was to finish. I wanted to do the 20 burpees. That's what I wanted to do. I felt pretty good that
Did you?
morning. I did. I
Yeah.
did.
Nice.
And it
That's fun.
became,
Nice.
but because and it's one of those things too, this other part of it is like, hey, I started the workout with no real thought of prior experiences, of learned experiences. It was just, hey, it's excitement. Let's go. Let's do this.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then, within the first quarter of it, it's like, wait a minute. Well, let's think about where other workouts, other experiences I've had like this, and start to play this out a little bit. Because if I keep it up this way, like I've gone too hard on a workout and imploded and couldn't finish. Like those things have happened. So
Right.
tapping into those past experiences and changing course and how I thought about completing it was a game changer. And like I said, it was just like, hey, this next round needs this much extra effort to complete. In my head, though it was the accumulation of burpees was a lot, the thought was like, one more. How much effort do I need to complete one more?
Yeah.
It's interesting that you went out with a goal. Like you said, I want to do, and that's what's kind of cool about some of these. Like it didn't occur to me to have like a goal on like how many burpees. It was just sort of like see what happens. But to your point about life, yeah, like having it's just a funny parallel to different things and how you experience them. But my experience was when in that initial 15-minute time frame, there was a lot of like looking back, like maybe the sled's too light, maybe the sled's too heavy, maybe I should be going up by twos. And then it's like just hang on, like kind of the same thing, like just sort of pump the brakes in a way of like, okay, let's not make these decisions like all of a sudden be like, okay, I'm just gonna go up by twos, or I'm gonna put more weight on, so I'm gonna take my weight off. But I got to the halfway. I decided somewhere in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, at the halfway point, I will start going up by two. So there was sort of like I guess, somewhat of a little goal. But then it was like, we'll just see what happens. And to your point of imploding, yeah, I hit 19 of 20. And then from there, it was like, I think I saw 18 once more. And it was, I was thinking, oh my God, like this is like a whole different 59 minutes ago, this was like a joke, and now I'm barely clinging to the to the workout. But it is just so fascinating how people can approach these things with the same constraints very differently. And some of the point of this workout was also choosing, like you have a choice in some things. So
yeah, and you guys talk a lot about that, right? Like with this idea of agency, like, hey, there is that choice, that control over what you do, but also what the result of that is, right? Like, what are those consequences of what you do? And like, it's funny you said like with a goal. There are definitely workouts I go into without a goal, but I would say that most of the time there's some goal, and the goal isn't always like. I didn't know if the goal was going to be 20 on this one. Because I had seen this. You sent this to me. How far in advance? It was quite some time, so I had time to think about it. And you know how it is. Like, I'm 42, so some days I wake up and I'm like, let's go. And a lot of the other days I'm like, cruise in at 85% today. Got to wake up again tomorrow. But I felt pretty good. And I was like, okay, burpees aren't my favorite, but it's like I'm going to go after this one. And it's interesting because that's how you kind of sometimes how it is with life and a goal, right? Like you have a goal, and before you really think it through and come up with the strategy that's really going to get you to that goal, you go all in, and you're like, whoa. Like, I still want to get this goal, but I need to have enough. Like, if I give everything to achieving it, I might give so much. By the time I get there, like, look what I've lost, right? If I get there, look what I've lost. Friendships, whatever, family. There's all kinds of things that people tend to sacrifice in order to achieve a goal. And you just got to weigh it out and say if it's worth it, right? So And that's
Yeah, or
kind
you
of,
burn out before you get there,
or
to
you
your
burn out
point.
before you get there,
Yeah.
right? So for sure. And that was a lot of the thought here within the workout. And I will say, like, I didn't get super philosophical in the middle of the workout. It was always
No.
about the workout.
Yeah.
So when I started thinking about these things, um, it was about completing it. And then afterwards, I was like, wow, this is when you can really start
Yeah.
making those connections. And it was a little bit
Mm-hmm.
after. It wasn't
Yeah.
right after. Right after if I look at my notes, right after I kind of just talked about the thoughts to complete it. Like, I knew I had to get
Mm-hmm.
to 18. I knew that's where, at 18, I knew it was going to get super difficult and there needed to be
Mm-hmm.
a new strategy. And at that point, I mean, the only strategy I had was like, you can't think about anything else. Like, the entire sled, every step, all I repeated was the number that I had to do for
Wow.
burpees. And I just said 18,
Mm-hmm.
18, 18, 18, 18, 18 until I stopped. About 20 seconds of break. I do the same little pattern of walk, put my hands on my knees, wait for the 3, 2, 1 countdown, and then go.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I always counted down. Like, burpees were always counting down. Like, seeing, because
Interesting.
there's always some kind of visual aspect, at least for me, when there are numbers involved, like in workouts, right? For me, it's like it's a visual, almost like
Mm-hmm.
just it's just rotating numbers down, 17,
Huh.
16, 15.
I
It's
don't think I have the mental agility to count down. Like, I think I would get lost somewhere in there.
really.
But there was some therapist person, I don't even know, doctor, who was talking about and Bill might remember, like, not counting to 10, like counting to uneven numbers. It was like an exercise science psychology kind of thing, like going to 7 or 9, and like how, because you have these predetermined, like 10, like what 5 is like, what 10 is like, and like I don't know. But I listened to that and I thought, yep, that's me. Like 10. Okay, got to 10. Now it's like, 5. But that's interesting that you have that, yeah, counting down backwards. Yeah.
Yeah, and if the
Yeah,
number's
I
big
think that,
enough, I'll pyramid up, and then but I always
yeah.
want to finish on the way down. So, like, if it's
And
on
then high jump. Yeah.
21, like a 21, 15, 9 workout, I'll actually count to 11 and then 10 down to 1.
Uh-huh. Interesting.
Wow.
Look at
Okay.
this.
We're learning
Yeah, this is
many
good. So when
interesting
you say,
things.
who are you? This is all part of that answer.
The next workout I do, I'm probably gonna try that and then be like, what the fuck? Like,
Why is
what's
there
he?
a F in there? Is there a letter?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think, for me, when I did it, I had, well, if I'm being completely honest, saw it and was like, I'm not going to be able to do 20 in a minute. I'm pretty sure that's going to be beyond my burpee capacity. So I wonder, if I were to redo it with that goal of, let me actually set a goal and work for it, which means that might be I come up short and I have to deal then with that disappointment or the humility of whatever versus I'm just going to write myself off before I even do it and find this, and it's not necessarily right or wrong, but like find this celebration, which I think is helpful for sometimes of like, well, that's cool. Like I got close, versus like the disappointment of not hitting the goal, which is part of actively living in life too. Like, yeah, there's going to be stuff that we might not always get to. But I had an interesting thing where it was like 2 minutes in, right? And I'm thinking, I could literally be doing anything else in the world right now and be getting a better workout, because this is
Which is
no,
funny because it's like that, that's not the point necessarily. I mean, yes,
yeah,
it's a workout, but
no.
that wasn't the purpose.
Listen, I'm not saying what goes on up there is good, but and then like around like the 40-minute mark, it was like, all right, this is real now. This is definitely real. And I had this thing of like, at what point do your choices, which was part of this was an empowering workout to say, hey, make a choice, go through it, from the weight on the sled to, perhaps interval of the burpee and whatnot. But like, at what point does your choices kind of morph and change into your excuses?
Hmm.
And that for me was a cool, like, little bit of awareness of like, hey, you chose to do this. Yes, it's tiring. Like, yes, it's difficult. And maybe with a sled weight, like, okay, this is what you chose to put on. But like, that's not the excuse to justify the reality of perhaps the effort. It's just the choice you made. And having a little bit of honesty with that and checking myself of like how convenient the excuse is when really it's just you chose this. Like, it's your,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And for that, I was like, all right, that's cool. That was
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. And
that was a good experience.
to your point, the thinking, like during the workout for sure, I think it's for most people it's about the workout, but I do like the journal prompts, which sometimes it resonates some more than others with people,
Yeah.
but it's kind of a good, like, I like them because they do provide a little bit of like reflection and like connection to like something greater than just the workout, and which otherwise maybe you wouldn't have that opportunity. And I don't know, and I guess that's part of the physiology and psychology of it, like having moved your body and experienced that process connects it in a more real felt way than just if you were to sit down, and if it was just like a book of these mindsets and all you did was read them and do journals, like that would probably be valuable. But there's something about having gone through something that felt that you experienced that kind of thinking. I don't know how to articulate that,
No,
but yeah.
I think, well, it's interesting with both the points you just made. One, Bill, with the point you made, it just reminded me, and it's not exactly the way you described it, but when I was training really hard and I was on a team in CrossFit Atlanta, and we're going to the games and stuff, we used to have this thing where if somebody if somebody pulled out a weight vest in the workout, we'd be like, "Oh, so you just don't want to go hard today,
Right.
right?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Mhm.
you're making this choice
Excuse.
so
Yeah.
that you can use it as an excuse later on, right? Like
Hmm.
that's what you're doing, and that's okay. You can do that,
Right.
right?
This is what's
But
yeah.
that's why you're doing it. Like everyone else is doing the workout without a weight vest. You don't want to push yourself. You want to use it as an excuse. So put the weight vest on and then pull back and you can use it. Like that's okay. That's okay today. We'll take it.
Right.
It was just a funny, like as soon as you were saying that, I'm like, oh yeah. And listen, I did it. There were times when I
Of
did it too.
course.
It was one of those things where it was a joke, but it was definitely something that if you didn't want to push, just put the weight vest
Mhm.
on and why, but it's okay.
Mm,
You could wear it.
yeah.
And then the other part, which is interesting in the workout, Karian, that you talked about, was like in the towards the end, man, those rest breaks became so important, and because the other 2 minutes became very stressful, right? I
Mm,
mean, the sled,
Mhm.
it wasn't terrible, but it got hard, and
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
got hard because you were torn between push harder and get more rest,
mhm.
or don't push as hard, but now you don't have as much rest for the burpees. And I couldn't decide, like, am I wasting energy by pushing harder and trying to get more rest, or slowing down? Is there more friction? And it's like these are the thoughts that are going through my head
Right. Right.
in the
Right.
middle of
Right.
the sled sometimes. But anyways, my point was like those 2 minutes became very stressful, and that 1 minute to take that high level of stress and find a way through breathing and not moving and just being there was so important. And I was watching my heart rate quite a bit, and I'm like, hey, am I doing what I need to be doing to prepare for this next round, right? And it was like
Mm.
there became this pattern because I had to push down and back, so I had to switch the posts,
Poles.
right, for the poles for the sled. So it was like, and it became this like, pull it up, right hand goes into this one, turn around, go to this one, put my hands down, and then push. And then when I got to the other end, it was the same thing. Sit down on the weights, start breathing,
Mm-hmm.
take this chance to feel where I am, how I'm feeling, how much more can I push to just complete one more burpee. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
man, like that's, you talk about like the physiology. Say it again. The physiology of psychology. How did
Yeah,
what?
the physiology of psychology. Yeah,
So
yeah.
when you think about it that way, I mean, you know, maybe not that amount of stress, but there's so many points in life where it's like things get freaking stressful. It's like, but
Yeah,
you can take that minute,
right.
find ways to calm yourself down, and think about how can I get through this next point. And
Mm-hmm.
whether it's, I mean, the cool thing about a workout is you get to feel it real time right there. Like,
Yep.
exactly what's going on.
Yep.
And sometimes you don't have that. Like you don't have that same physical feeling in some of these other life stress, but internally, like it's all there. And
Yeah.
the the process of checking in with yourself, calming everything down, and then making that next plan to move that one step further. It's like, hey, you can take that with you anywhere. Like
Yeah,
that
that's
was,
the goal, right?
and if it's like, hey, there are points where, you have to change the strategy just a little bit to get you to the end. And that's
Mm-hmm.
okay. Your
Mm-hmm.
initial strategy is not always going to be the one that works best for you. And in this sense, it wasn't.
Yeah.
Right. And what's cool about it is like you don't know what's. I always think about this notion of like a path, and why no path is ever direct and straight. Like that road that exists out in Arizona that like Forrest Gump ran down. Like there's like one of those, and it's
Right.
like, oh, okay, you can see for hundreds of miles. Every other path in life is windy and twisty and up and down and just subtleties, right? Like that's the other thing. You drive along the road in a car and you're like, oh, this is a flat road. And then you get on a bike and you're like, this shit's like a mountain. What's happening?
That
Right?
you
You weren't
feel in
paying
the
attention.
wind, and yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like it was always the same pitch. It's just that now not only are you paying attention, there's a felt experience for
Mm-hmm.
you to like anchor your attention to. And the starter of the path or whatever that might be, you don't know what's around the corner or the next corner.
Yep.
And it's not to say that you can't do anything until you know for sure, right? Because it'd be like, hey, you go ahead, tell me what's up ahead. And it's like, that's not obviously an effective tactic, but to have that trust, and we've kind of talked about this when we chatted last, like this trust in self that I can both begin without knowing what the next 2 or 3 turns are that I can't yet see, but I can also have the trust that if I need to make a change, I have the flexibility, the adaptability, the willingness, the know how, whatever, to do that. That's in line with what my goal is, what my intentions are, what my current ability is. And, that is a really, I think, empowering theme and practice. And how do we do that? Because you can read all about this shit in a book, but like, oh, it's this experience that I'm immersing myself in so that I can be like, yeah, this is, novelty is a great fire starter and a
Mm-hmm.
shitty fuel source. And sometimes it's like, good, get it going, get it going. If that's enough, like, ooh, this is new, right? You weren't thinking about past experiences. You've got, decades of experience as being an athlete, and what started probably won't finish. and to be present and to be aware and to tune the awareness into what your intentions are, where the mind is going, what's working, what's not working.
Yeah.
All of that is, I think, really like where there's so much potential to be extracted, but we have to go into it to extract it.
When you talk about the novelty being a great fuel source to get people started, but I think about, people who want to do a half Ironman or a race or go to the CrossFit games, and they're like, they watch the games and they are fired up, or they hit the button, like you register for the race. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yes. And like the first 2 weeks, you are like dialed in. And then it's like, there's got to be something else that kind of, and an understanding of that, and kind of knowing that that's how it works, that drives you further. But that is so common. It's the initial excitement, and being able to utilize that and tap into it and use it as a fuel source. But then knowing there's got to be something else that kind of, because it's going to burn pretty fast.
Absolutely. I mean, even outside of this, I think about that with, well, with my experience, I think about what you just said there with CrossFit in general, right? And the novelty behind it, especially in the early days, was great. And it did get you started and super excited and all in. But I think there were other things that kept you in the gym. Like there's something,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like I've never done anything in fitness in my life for this long. I've been triathlete. I've done, the whole traditional gym stuff, and I swam. Like I've done a lot of different things, but
Yeah.
there's something other than just the workouts that keep you doing this as long as you do. You know what I mean? And it's something that's super unique about that program. But I do
Yeah,
think,
and I think that. Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, I think that that's it's great for people who are veterans of this to also know, like, there's repeating workouts, and that's always great to have like benchmarks. And then, these types of workouts, whether it's CrossFit or even, something like the dose, there's something, like, I find it refreshing. I do like one street parking workout a week. There's a little bit of that, like, ooh, like there is that novelty kind of built into it. Maybe, the other 5 days a week, you're kind of like, oh yeah, okay. But it is a cool program, these types of workouts that still provide a little bit, like, there's endless, you're never going to like have done all of it. Like, okay, there's not a single combination that I haven't done. Like, that's impossible. So,
yeah,
you can run 5-10 miles, like people who are high level endurance athletes, like they've done it all. But this still leaves a little bit of like, oh, I've not done that one yet. So
yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, like,
Cool.
finishing that workout, and taking the time to really be aware of my thoughts through 1 hour of a workout was, I don't know that it's something I've ever done, and
Wow.
it was really interesting to just like see how the mind wanders and the thought process behind it, and how the goal never changed, but the way I got there did, and there's like 3 distinct phases of like, you're all in, do everything, just go as hard as you can. Then it was like, all right, hold back and you think about the next round. How much can you give for the next round? Then it was like 18, 18, 18, 8. You just need to
right,
get through
gotta
this
be here,
round.
gotta be
Like
here.
you got to see, like you got to just like get through this round is what you need to do right now. That's it. And 3 completely different strategies that were used to reach a goal, right? And I think like, something
It's
to be learned
cool.
from that.
Very
Well, it's
cool.
cool that you now have access and you can do one a week. And
I know. Here we go.
yeah, I mean,
Time to do some
it's
10 meters.
Yeah.
I know. It's kind of one of those where you're like, ooh, when you've done it before,
Oh yeah.
it's like, the mindset's a good one for that one. But
That is a
yeah,
good one. Yeah.
but
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, cool to have this conversation kind of make a little bit of a loop of what started as, who and curiosity and learning, and to have that be sort of what was experienced and then hopefully continued is really cool. Really, really cool.
Yeah, no, well, one, thank you both for the opportunity to experience this and continue to. And I'm extremely excited about, I mean, being involved with this once a week and
Yeah.
learning, here's the thing, like learning more about myself. I mean,
Yeah.
Yeah.
that's one of the things like I really got out of this was like,
Yeah.
like I didn't know that's exactly what went on. Like I knew I
Mm.
thought through workouts because I didn't like distractions, but really paying attention to those thoughts and how they changed and morphed um, throughout the 60 minutes was like, wow, it's really interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool.
And I think it is a cool thing for like people ask about like what is this? What do we do? And it is a cool thing getting to practice that, but doing fitness. Like
Yeah,
it's for fitness people. If you don't like fitness, like this is
You're gonna hate
probably
it.
not, yeah, this is not the kind of mindset work you probably want to do. Go find something else. But for people that already like fitness, I think that once a week opportunity to it's got to be it's great for time with yourself and also probably performance and a number of other things. So, well, we're looking
absolutely.
forward to hearing more thoughts and feedback and
Yeah.
anything you want to share.
Yeah, of
So,
course.
so thank you for the time.
Of course. No, thank you. This has been amazing. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Awesome. Mike, so good chatting with you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Awesome. It's good to chat with you as well again, Bill, and looking
Yeah,
forward to
yeah,
see
yeah.
our other interview come up as well. So this has been great. What a great week. Thank you.
I know,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, and we'll put the thing in your handle and
CrossFit
Awesome.
Health and
CrossFit
all that
Health and
stuff.
all of
Yeah.
that in our stuff. So
Perfect.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
cool. Awesome.